Hi there and welcome back. This is Jennifer and I hope you're having a good day. So a couple weeks ago I shared a hidden slider card design, and at the end I gave you a little teaser of another type of card I wanted to share, and this one I call a surprise slider card. So with these cards, the large element on the front of the card actually moves to reveal a hidden sentiment underneath. Now, if you didn't check out that other hidden slider card video, I'll link to it in the top right corner here. Please watch that first. This is definitely a stepped up version, a little more complicated, so I think it's helpful to see the other one before diving into this. But I have several examples to show you, so I think you'll be able to tackle it and create some cards like this yourself. So let me show you how these cards work. So it's just a basic card, but there's a pull tab, and when you pull it, there's a hidden message underneath. You don't need any special dies for this. You can use what you have on hand. And I'll give you enough examples that I think it will show just that. So my first examples use the Concord and 9th Crafty Turnabout stamp set and dies. I did a little happy dance when I saw these products because I like to make cards for my crafty friends, and there are many sentiments and fun images included in the stamp set and in the coordinating die set. So I have a few examples using these products. So the large stamp at the top of this set is a Turnabout stamp. I've used Turnabout stamps many times in videos, but I'll show you again how to set it up quickly. When you get the stamp set, you need to do one step, and once you've done that, you never need to do it again. So I'll show you how to do that. Included in the packaging is a guide, or if you didn't keep packaging like me, you can print it from their website. You line up the stamp with the image on the guide, and then you use a straight edge to draw an X on the back of the stamp that lines up with the X on the guide. Now, people have asked why they don't just make the stamp with the X on the back of the stamp. It's just not possible. So we just need to do it once, and then you're good to go. Next, you need a stamping tool. I'll be using the MISTI, and you need a 6x6 piece of paper with an X in the center. I call this a turntable. I actually laminated mine so I can use it over and over again with different Turnabout stamps. So you've probably seen it in videos. Next, you'll take your stamp and line the X up on the stamp with the X on your turntable. You'll close your MISTI door on it, and now you're ready to do your Turnabout stamping. This is easy and such a fantastic way to create cool patterns. Now, onto that turntable, you can tape any size piece of cardstock. But what I like to do now is instead of using the 6x6 turntable, I just use a 6x6 piece of cardstock, and I do all my stamping on there. The nice thing about doing this is I end up with a larger piece, and I can save any pieces that I trim off for another card. So I start by stamping the image first. Here I'm using Hero Art Soft Pool ink, and I double stamped it to make it darker. I then rotated it one turn, pick another color, and stamp that. I'll rotate it another turn, pick another color, and stamp that. And you'll do that 4 times until you have the complete pattern. You could do them all in the same color if you want, or as many colors as you'd like. But I always like to do the 4 different colors because I find that it gives such a unique pattern that really would have been hard to stamp with any other stamp. If this were just a regular background stamp, all of those images would be the same color. So I went ahead and I did a bunch of these backgrounds, and I decided to make 4 to share with you, and I listed the colors of the inks at the top of the screen. I just wanted to show you how every one is a little bit different and has a different feel about it based on what inks I used. Keep in mind you could also do a tone-on-tone look, or you could do colored cardstock and stamp with white inks or gold and silver heat emboss. You can really create a lot of different looks using the Turnabout stamps. Since these were for crafty friends, I decided to go with bright and cheerful colors for today. Next, we need to pick a large element that will slide on the front of the card. You want something a bit bigger. A large die cut like this one is a good choice. These are the Crafty dies that I showed you earlier. Now onto that large postage stamp, I'm stamping a greeting with black ink. I also wanted to include that little paintbrush that I made using the die set, and I wanted it underneath the word color so that the word color was on it too. But you may notice with my die cut, I used some silver shiny cardstock, and that won't take the ink very well. So I'm going to change my little paintbrush. And I also wanted the paint on the brush to match the pink ink that I used on the background that we created earlier. So I couldn't find the right color of pink, so I took my pink ink pad, just swiped it against some white cardstock and die cut that. And that way I have the pink that is perfect match with my background. I also removed that silver cardstock and just made the entire brush a craft cardstock. So now I can stamp on there again in the same location using my stamping tool, then glue that brush down, and my brush is now part of the sentiment. So this is a little spotlight thing, and it was a great way to make room for the paintbrush since the sentiment really filled the area. I didn't have room for it, so I just put it behind the sentiment. Okay, so now that we have our stamped panel ready and the large element that will slide, it's time to put our slider card together. So I have trimmed my pieces down. I have the stamped panel that is 4 inches by 5 inches and a note card that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/4. Now this is a 1/4 of an inch shorter than a typical note card. You can see there that white one is a typical size. The reason I made this note card a tiny bit shorter is so that the tab can stick out and it'll still fit in the envelope. So with this particular card, the element will move up, so the tab will be at the top. Now remember in my last surprise slider card video, we cut 1 slit to create the slider effect. This time we're going to cut 2. Now since I'm centering this on my card, I'm actually going to flip the panel over so that my pencil lines are on the back. Now I'm centering that large element at the center of the panel. I'm going to draw 3 pencil lines. The first will be at the bottom of that element, just so I know where I need to stop my little slits. The other 2 pencil marks will be about a 1/4 of an inch in from the sides of the element towards the top. So you can see that's about a 1/4 of an inch in from one side and a 1/4 inch from the other. Okay, so now it's time to cut slits that connect those dots. So I'm just kind of drawing a pencil line so you can see where the 2 slits will be. You really don't need to draw that if you don't want to. Now I'm using my Fiskars trimmer to cut a slit that goes from that bottom line to about a 1/2 inch from the top. If you do not have a trimmer like this that allows you to cut in the center of something, you can use a craft knife and a straight edge. Okay, so I'm going to do that for the other slit. I'll start cutting towards that bottom mark we made, and then about a 1/2 inch from the top of the card. So I'll be honest, I think that's the hardest part of this card is cutting those 2 slits. But it doesn't have to be perfect. As long as those slits can be hidden behind your large element, you're good to go. Now when you put the large element on, you will be able to see the slits at the top of the card. But that doesn't matter. They're not very noticeable. Since we have a pattern stamping on that background, they're hard to see. Even if you see the slits at the top and the bottom, you're good. Okay, so now we need to create the pull tab. I like to create a pull tab that's a little bit wider than whatever element we have on the front of the card. So I'd say it's about a 1/2 inch wider. It doesn't really matter the length, but a good way to start is 6 inches. So I have that white piece, and what will happen is it'll be behind that stamped panel, and when you pull it up, that large element will go up with it. Now the last piece we need is the feet for that element, so that I could slide through those cuts that we made. Now for the feet, you could use a piece of cardstock, but I like to use a piece of acetate because it slides so nicely. I use Hero Arts acetate, but you could use any thick, clear packaging too. And I cut mine about 3 1/2 inches by 1/2 inch. It really doesn't matter the length, but you want it to be about a 1/2 inch wide. This will go on the back bottom of our element. And when you put it back there, you'll see that the little feet stick out, and that's what we need to have so it will slide. So holding that clear piece on the back bottom of our element, I'm going to flip it over, and I'm putting tape on the back of this so that it stays there. I'm using Be Creative tape, but you could use Scotch tape or any kind of masking tape for this. I'm putting the pieces about a 1/4 of an inch in from the sides, and I'm using several pieces because I really want it to stay put. So this will create little clear feet that stick out from the back of our large element. Those 2 feet will go into those 2 slits that we created, allowing it to slide up and down. So you can see here I have tape about 1/4 of an inch in from the sides, and my little clear feet stick out. Again, that clear piece could be regular cardstock if you don't have any acetate. Okay, so now it's time to tuck those little feet into the slits. So one goes in one slit and the other goes in the other slit. The feet will be on the back of the card and our stamped element will be on the front. And you can see right away how nicely it will slide. Now to finish this process off, I like to take a couple pieces of tape and temporarily tape that stamped element center on our panel. So see how it's centered there, and I just taped it there temporarily. Now we're going to flip this over and finish it off. It's just helpful to have that held in place to do this. So we need to attach those 2 clear feet to our pull tab. So I'm taking some strong double-sided tape and I'm tucking it behind the feet, very close up to the slit. Notice that that adhesive is pointing up towards the camera. I'll take another piece of tape, tuck it behind the other foot, pretty close up to that slit. Again, the adhesive is facing the camera. And now we can take our large pull tab and lay that onto this. You'll notice that there is some space above and below the pull tab and to the left of it, which happens to be the bottom of the card. Now we have those little clear feet that are sticking out from the pull tab. They don't need to be sticking out, so I'll just use my scissors to trim them off. The final step is to put foam tape around the pull tab. You want to be as close as you can to the pull tab without actually touching it. You want a teeny bit of wiggle room, but not too much. And that bottom piece, that tells the pull tab where to stop. So I'm adding this onto our note card, and then I can remove those 2 pieces of tape so that we can test out our slider. Now, all we need to do is add a sentiment that will be behind that element so that when you pull up, you see it. You could stamp that directly on the background, but what I decided to do was die cut a small heart and stamp Love You from that same Crafty Concord and 9th stamp set and glue that between the slits. Just make sure you don't glue over those slits. You want those to be exposed. So while the card is closed, you can cut off the excess of the tab. And I stamped Pull Here from this Lawn Fawn Push Here stamp set. I use this a lot when I am doing any kind of interactive card. It's a great stamp set to have. So here's the final card. It has a place to write a message on the inside, and it has that fun pull tab that reveals the hidden sentiment behind it. And by the way, I did put a little bit of glossy accents on that pink paint on the brush so it stands out a bit. I absolutely love that little brush. I think it's so cute. Okay, now for another example using one of those crafty backgrounds that I created. I'm not going to show you the process of this as it is very similar to the last one, and I have some other examples to show you. But for this one, it's a landscape card, so it's a sideways card, but the pull tab is still at the top. On that center element, I stamped a sentiment from that Crafty stamp set that the Turnabout stamp is on, and I also assembled a pair of scissors using the coordinating dies. Now you can see those 2 slits that are vertical on the card right next to the word Crafty Friends are the best. So all you have to do is pull the pull tab and you reveal the sentiment underneath. Before we go through the process of another card, I wanted to show you the other 2 examples that I created with these crafty backgrounds. This one has a little die cut stamp. I think this is probably my favorite of all of them. The pull tab is on the side, so you just pull it and reveal the Crafty Friends sentiment below. This is very much like the card I just showed you the process of. It's just that the pull tab is on the side instead of on the top of the card. The card is just turned. Here's another with the same orientation. This one has little die cut buttons, a needle and thread that are included in that coordinating die set. And again, I did the side pull tab. I think the side orientation is my favorite of the different hidden slider cards, but you could do any one you want, whatever works for that center panel that you've created. So let's go ahead and create a card where there is that side pull tab and the center element slides over to the side. I feel like the more you watch the process, the better it'll get for you. So this is very similar to the last one. Okay, for this one, I used a background, again, a Turnabout stamp set from Concord and 9th. This is the Deck the Halls Turnabout stamp set. I followed the same process where I put the X on the back of the stamp with the help of the guide, and then I positioned it into my MISTI. I stamped it with 4 colors of ink, rotating each time to create a colorful background. I'm zooming through this since the process is just like the Turnabout stamp I used at the beginning of the video, and I really wanted to focus on the hidden slider technique instead. Keep in mind that these backgrounds are super large, so I can trim off a little strip when we make our card and save that for another. Okay, so I made 2 backgrounds using this. So this one I just showed you, and here is one with all different colors of green. I just think that's so beautiful. Okay, time to make the elements that go on the center of the card. I used the Concord and 9th Happy Holidays label dies. Those are the dies that you see on the left. And I also used the Concord and 9th Merry and Bright dies. That's what you see on the right. From that set, I used the little holly and the berry dies. We'll use the big Merry and Bright on a later card. So I die cut 2 of the label dies from some green cardstock. And from the center of one of those die cuts, I'm cutting the words Happy Holiday. Run that through my die cut machine, and I'm going to keep the negative space. So I'll take the negative space that has the Happy Holidays and put it on top of the other die cut, which I've covered with adhesive. That way it stays in place, and I can pop into the openings the Happy Holiday letters in a darker color. Since there's adhesive exposed, these just pop in easily, and I get a die cut inlay look. However, I really wanted my letters to stand out, so I wanted to stack a few on top of each other. I'm skipping adding the little centers to all the letters just because there's no reason to, since I'm stacking more on top. You won't notice that I didn't add them. I erased the extra adhesive and added more layers of Happy Holidays die cuts. So I have 3 layers on top of each other so they stand out nicely. If you wanted to save time, you could skip the added layering of the die cuts and just stick with the first inlay layer of the Happy Holidays letters. I just wanted to be sure that my sentiments stood out. Okay, so I gathered all the other pieces I need for this card. I have my stamped background trimmed to 4 inches by 5 inches, and I have a card that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/4. So it's a little bit short of a regular note card. This is exactly what we did earlier. The pull tab will be on the right, and when you pull it, this whole element will slide to the right. I also have a white piece of cardstock that is trimmed down that I stamped my sentiment on, and that will be adhered under our main element. I didn't want to stamp on the background because I felt like it wouldn't stand out enough, so I stamped on white cardstock and we'll adhere it there. Okay, I also have my little piece of acetate. It's about 3.5 inches by 1/2 inch. Again, you could use cardstock here if you wanted. And I have my pull tab piece. I like to start with the piece that's about 3 inches by 6 inches. You really just want to make sure that it is wider than the element that you're sliding on the front. So now it's time to create the 2 slits in our background. I'm flipping over my background so I can do some pencil marks, and I'm making 2 marks. One that's about 1/4 inch from the edge of the die cut from the top, and one that's about 1/4 inch from the bottom. So after I have those 2 marks, we're going to make 2 slits into the background. And I'm making sure that the slits are right along those little pencil marks. I'm cutting about 1/2 inch from the top to about 1/2 inch from the bottom of our panel. So you'll see I'm dropping my blade there, pulling it up to the top about 1/2 inch away. It really doesn't matter how long those slits are. The closer they are to the edge, the more sliding you can get. And it's okay if people can see the slits you've cut into your background, so don't worry if they're too long. I find about 1/2 inch from the edge is a great position. Now I'm gluing my stamped piece right into the center, making sure to not glue over those slits. You need those slits to be open. Okay, now it's time to put these guys together. I have my little clear piece that I'm going to put on the left-hand side. It's the opposite side of where the pull tab will be. And I'm taping it to the back. I have my tape about 1/4 inch in from the 2 sides. And I'm putting a pretty generous amount down because I want it to stay put. So you can see it has those little clear feet sticking out. I'm going to slide those little feet into the 2 slits on the background. This is exactly as we did before. It's just that the pull tab is going to the right instead of to the top. Now you'll see it slides too far to the left and too far to the right. That's okay. We'll create stoppers to keep it from going too far. So at this point, we're going to put those temporary pieces of tape so that the element stays taped to the center of the card. And now I'm going to put the double-sided adhesive onto the back of our little clear feet. The adhesive is pointing up to the camera so that when we lay our pull tab piece onto these, it will attach nicely. So now I'm taking the pull tab piece, lining it up, making sure it's centered between the top and the bottom of my panel, and I will press that down. You can see there's plenty of room above, below, and next to the pull tab to add our foam tape. We can cut the little extra of the clear feet that are sticking out the sides and then put the foam tape down. So the foam tape, let me tell you about this again. You want it to be close to the pull tab but not touching it. If it's too far from the pull tab, it'll wiggle too much. If it's too close, you'll pretty much make it so the pull tab doesn't work. So you want it as close to it as you can be without actually touching it. And make sure you put the adhesive on the left because that's what keeps the main element from sliding too far over. So we can add that onto our card. Once we have it there, we can remove that temporary purple tape and test out our slider effect. And I tell you, this really slides very smoothly since the pull tab is wide and since we used an acetate piece. I just find that it slides very nicely. So I can cut the excess off the pull tab and stamp the pull here sentiment on it. I usually stamp that with a lighter ink, but on these I went with an ink that matched the background. So there you have the pull tab effect. I did also add some holly and pine die cuts from the die sets that I showed you earlier. You can really add anything you want onto that center element. You just want to make sure the center element is big enough so that when you do the sliding effect, you have room for sentiment underneath. So you could even put a window to the inside of the card underneath if you wanted, or a photo or anything at all. Since I was happy with how this one turned out, I decided to make a second using my other stamped background. This time that stamped background was light enough that I could just stamp my inside sentiment directly on it. Everything else is absolutely the same. I did add some berries to this one with some glossy accents on it. So you can see how you can do this type of slider card in different orientations. You just need to figure out where to put those two slits and then you're good to go. Okay, my last example shows that you could use even shaped dies for that center element as long as they're large enough. Now with this one I have a square card where the pull tab is at the top, so the center element slides upwards. Okay, so I used another Concord and 9th Turnabout stamp set to create the background on this one. This is the Snowflake Turnabout stamp set. I set it up just like I did at the beginning of this video, and I am again stamping on a 6x6 piece of cardstock. But this time I'm using a colored cardstock and using colored inks. I've stamped this 3 times with 3 different shades of pool ink, rotating my paper in between each stamping. However, for the 4th stamp image, I decided to use a white pigment ink. I really like the look of the white pigment ink on a colored background. Now my background is very light, so I had to stamp the white a few times to get the white to show up against that light cardstock, but I definitely think it's worth it. I made a second background using the pool ink colors on white cardstock just to show you the different options that you can get. I'm going to save this background for a card that I'm doing with Lila later. But there you can see the white pigment ink with all the colored inks. Remember, you could do heat embossing and different colors of powders on these backgrounds too. Now to create the large element that slides on this card, I used the Concord and 9th Snow Flurry die set. I die cut 3 of the large snowflakes and glued them on top of each other and added a large circle behind it, just so that there was more solid area in the center to hide the sentiment we'll put underneath. I also stamped this large snowflake stamp onto the die cut just for a little bit more interest to it, and I stamped that with soft pool ink. For the sentiment, I used the Merry and Bright die set that I showed you earlier. I die cut 3 from white cardstock and 1 from silver glitter cardstock and adhered them together. I then carefully cut away the word Mary, because that's all I wanted to use on this card. I'll save bright for another card. I trim my background down to 5 by 5, and I have a 5.5 inch by 5.5 inch white note card. Now it's time to create the 2 slits to do the sliding effect. I flip my panel over, and I'm drawing 2 pencil lines about 1/4 inch in from the edge of the circle. So there's my first mark and my second mark. I now need to create 2 slits along those marks. I'm going from a 1/2 inch from one side to a 1/2 inch from the other side. It really doesn't matter how long those slits are, as long as you don't cut your paper in half. Okay, so we have our 2 slits right there in the middle. It's time to put our little feet onto our snowflake. So I have it on the edge there. At this point, I'm thinking I'm doing a side pulling card, but you'll see I change along the way. But it doesn't matter, it goes together the same way. I'm putting tape to tape that towards the edge of my snowflake, and I have my little feet hanging off the side. I tuck the 2 little feet into the 2 slits on the panel, and then I'm centering that element, that snowflake, in the center of the panel. And I'll put 2 pieces of temporary tape on there to hold it in place. I'll now tuck my double-sided adhesive behind the feet on both sides, pretty close to the slits, and then I can add my pull tab piece. I created a piece that was about 4 inches wide by 6 inches. Pressing it down close to where these clear feet are, putting foam adhesive all around the pull tab, very close to it but not touching it, and then I can add that to my 5.5 inch by 5.5 inch note card. I then can remove the 2 pieces of tape so I can test out my slider effect, and there you have a shaped die cut that moves to reveal a hidden sentiment underneath. Now when I went to add my silver glitter Mary die cut, the silver kind of got lost on my snowflake. So I'm coloring the glitter cardstock with my Copic marker, this is BG78, so that I could make it stand out more. I find that's a great way to create custom colors of glitter cardstock. You can also do that with alcohol inks or Sharpies. So I used some strong liquid adhesive to add the Mary onto our center snowflake. And I also die cut a circle and stamped a sentiment on it that I glued underneath that main element. So this is a 5.5 by a little over 5.5 inch card. So I have a 6 by 6 white envelope that I'll use with it. I really like the larger size so that I could have that large snowflake that moves with the pull tab. If you don't have large die cuts like the snowflake, you could also just die cut a circle or cut a rectangle or square and use that as the moving element. I like that this technique doesn't require any special tools to create the sliding effect. So I hope you'll give this a try. It looks a little complicated, but as you do the process, it becomes very obvious, and it's something that's fun to put together. I link all of the supplies that I use down in my YouTube description below, and I have them listed over on my blog. In the middle are a couple other videos that you might like. I always appreciate the time that you spend with me here in these videos, and I hope you'll return again soon. Have a great week and take care.